We'll talk to you about how we standardize a fragmented process, how we accelerated speed to decision making, and ultimately how we increased the amount of value that we could add as insight to the MPD process. I'm joined today by James from our partner agency in this process, Toluna.
Thank you very much, Rosa. As you see, it's a very recent photo. So me I'm talking about. Thanks very much, Rosa. It's a pleasure to be here. As Rosa said, we're here to talk to you today about a journey, a story really, about how we've worked together and collaborated to create something very unique in terms of a modular approach to concept testing that is both driving efficiency in terms of speed, cost, and deliverables, easy for me to say, whilst at the same time being completely bespoke to Asahi. For anyone that does know Toluna, I work with some of the most dynamic beverages brands in the world to help them make better decisions. And I do that by being privileged enough to work for Toluna and using really those three pillars of technology, of access to an expert panel, access to a global panel of 40 million consumers in 70 markets, and an expertise and service provision, which comes through Harris Interactive, which is a Toluna-owned company. All of which is underpinned by an agile service model. Excuse me. But we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Today, we're focusing very much on accelerating the innovation process and specifically on concept testing. And just to set the scene somewhat, we all know right now that the pace of change in consumer behavior is changing enormously and changing very fast, particularly being driven at even greater speeds by the pandemic. In CPG, we see that a lot, but particularly in the beer and the alcohol sector. And we see that really in four different key ways. One is in premiumization, which I don't know if I can say or not, but I keep saying it out loud and eventually, hopefully it will work. What we see in terms of premiumization is that nearly half of all serves now, particularly in the on-trade, are identified as premium. And that's up from a third 10 years ago already. A nice example of that would probably be that imported beers are now seen as more premium. And for instance, Asahi Super Dry, we'll talk about this at the end, which you can sample on the stand when we get to the drinks section at the end of today, is considered a premium imported beer. In terms of new flavors, there's a real demand in the marketplace now for new flavors, and there's been an explosion of new offerings, both in the beer category but also beyond around alcohol. Hard seltzers is a particularly obvious one to point to. We know from our own data that 59% of people are more open to trying a product for the first time, and probably a great example of that would be White Claw. Of all the hard seltzers, that's probably the best known one, which was launched in June 2020. In terms of no and low alcohol, it's one of the fastest growing categories around. It's due to grow 17% in the UK this year to be worth over £600 million. And 70% we know from a survey that we did earlier this year on Dry January of people tried to cut down on alcohol in January. 12% got to the end of January. I'm part of the 58. You don't have to admit if you are. But it was worth a go, right? And it's really being driven by a health-conscious kick. That's where that's coming from. We also know that 46% of alcohol drinkers have tried no or low variants. And as I say, it's a really fast-growing, probably one of the fastest-growing sectors, categories rather. And then sustainability, and that really flows through everything, particularly across the brand life cycle, from manufacturing through to packaging. We're seeing all sorts of innovation coming through. And it even affects brand purpose and ESG. Some of you may have heard us earlier on the stand talking about environmental and social values. And that's something that comes across very strongly in terms of innovation too. Lovely example there, which you gave me actually, thank you, Rosa, which is wonderful, where Kellogg's actually use their surplus cereal to turn into beer. They partnered with a local brewery up in Manchester, Salford, I believe. My particular favourite was they turned Cocoa Pops into a beer called, Sling It Stout. I thought it was brilliant. Anyway, so that's enough from me. Rosa, let's talk about Asahi. We can see innovation is important in the category, but why is it important for Asahi?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, as a global beer manufacturer and increasingly extending into other kinds of beverages, basically we want to help people make meaningful connections over a drink. Sounds pretty simple, but yeah, exactly as you've said, the ways that they want to do that are changing rapidly, and we have to keep up. So increasingly, yeah, they want to connect over a more premium offering. So we have to make sure that we've got great imported global brands. We've got lovely local craft offers to help them do that. Yeah, they want those. They want to connect with those new flavors, new textures. So I've got a really nice example here coming out of our Central European business, which is hard made alcoholic iced tea crush. And then, yeah, sometimes they don't want to drink alcohol at all, but we still want to allow them to connect over a drink. So we've got to be making best-in-class non-alcoholic liquids, such as our recently launched brand new liquid under the Peroni Nastro 0% line. So, yeah, innovation is obviously critical to helping us keep pace with that kind of thing. But as anyone who's worked in a big global matrix organization will know, pushing through meaningful innovation at pace certainly has its challenges. And I think you know a bit about that as well.
That's a good point. So, do you see what we did there? So, what are the challenges? We asked 300 people like you, Rosa, like many of you in this room. What are the key challenges that you find in terms of leveraging insight? And you can see the key themes down the left-hand side. I'm not going to read out the slide to you. But what broadly came out was that it's really hard for people to balance that available budget and resources with fast, high-quality insights delivered in a consistent way. And you probably want to wait for the photo. There you go. So what we find is that all of that's underpinned by a smorgasbord, a literal smorgasbord of different vendors and different methodologies, very much so, like we were talking about earlier in the year, different technologies, access to those technologies. The core problem is being able to optimize that limited resource against quality and speed. So what's the answer to all of those problems? Well, it's simple. It's simplicity. And what does that mean without turning this into a sales pitch? Well, it means you need a platform. It can be any platform, but it needs to be one that handles a broad spectrum of standard and customizable MPD tests. You need to have simple connections between those tests, between ad hoc and custom tests, and maybe even some quant in there as well. You need to have a consistent global approach, which can be driven through that platform or driven through an agile service model. And the agile service model needs to be able to give you the ability, when you've got more time than money, to be able to do things DIY or with limited amounts of assistance. And when you've got more money than time, to be able to leverage that serviced offering and be able to pull that back. So Rosa, what was the challenge that you were trying to solve at Asahi?
Seamless, isn't it? So we looked across the business at all of the different concept testing that was going on. We identified a number of different issues that were holding us back. They were essentially adding complexity, so not simplicity, adding time, sometimes even creating repetition, and fundamentally delaying speed to decision making, not what we wanted. The most obvious of those issues was that we had different types of concept testing going on in different markets. And, many of those were great methodologies, nothing wrong with the methodologies, and, had merits in their own rights. But what it meant is that we had different KPIs being used in different conversations, which doesn't really help when you're trying to compare concepts across markets or you're trying to sell in an MPD from one region to the other. So that was a really big issue. And then, of course, with those different methodologies, we had lots of different suppliers working across the business as well. So we didn't always have control of those different approaches. And that kind of created additional time, additional cost, just not always that much flexibility fundamentally. And on top of that, we found a variable level of kind of insight and innovation expertise being delivered with those different methodologies. So sometimes we were essentially paying to have a templated survey run repeatedly. We weren't realizing the benefit of that templating that wasn't being passed on to us. So as part of a broader push for standardization across the business, we decided we were going to take that templating, we're going to kind of take control of the methodology in-house and look for a partner who we can work with to deliver that technically and in a flexible way. So what we were looking for was the vision we were going out into the market to get to. The most important thing was obviously one consistent standardized questionnaire template. with, crucially, our own bespoke KPIs. So the KPIs that everyone was already used to. Fundamentally, our key stakeholders are brand directors, marketing directors, innovation directors. They are busy people. They don't need a new innovation framework. They don't need a new language to learn. Essentially, they need one consistent language and set of action standards that everyone's aligned on and everyone agrees with. So if we can deliver a new methodology, but still deliver that was the main thing. At the same time, as well as standardizing the methodology from an insight perspective, we thought it was a good opportunity to optimize that methodology and make sure that, okay, we're going to standardize it, but let's make sure it's the best in class version of that questionnaire. So we actually took inspiration from some of those different approaches that had been going on across the different markets to kind of pick and mix what's the best in class going to look like. And also by working with a partner who could bring some of that thought leadership of what does good NPD concept testing look like today, we could make sure that we were kind of at the forefront and using all the contemporary principles of what it should be. I think a really big deal for us was flexibility. That was a huge focus. I think anyone who's working in or with a client-side insight team knows that we're more stretched than ever. So while I love the idea of a sexy DIY tool and I can do it all myself, I don't always actually have time to do that. If you don't have the time to invest in it upfront, to learn how to use it day to day, it doesn't save as much time or money as you think it's going to. So we wanted the option for a bit of that, but we also wanted the option to be able to lean on deep research expertise from a partner to deliver a full service where needed. And because we're very easy to please, we wanted both of those options to be extremely high quality. So the DIY option needs to be extremely easy to use, intuitive, dashboards, real-time results, etc. And the full service needs to be, deep research expertise and innovation literate debriefs. We wanted our cake and to eat it too, clearly. And last but not least, of course, budgets are stretched everywhere. So fundamentally, we wanted to be getting for the same or less money, more tests, more concept testing to be able to ultimately support more decisions. And one other objective, to be brutally honest, was we wanted to make life easier for our insight team. NPD processes are notoriously complex and they often throw up a number of different questions from a number of different stages throughout the process and a number of different stakeholders. This goes far beyond just the core concept. So you might have a pricing question. You might want some early clues on the packaging. Some bright sparks come up with some new flavors they want to throw in. Nobody can agree on the right name. So there's lots of different things that people find themselves asking throughout the process. And if you're not careful, this can end up as, 6 different studies. So you've either got a really overloaded central insight team, or if you can't handle it centrally, teams start going off and doing their own thing. So you end up back with inconsistency, fragmentation, and a lot of wheel spin, again, delaying speed to decision making. But what you often find is not all of these things actually require their own whole project. Sometimes they do. If you've got a really knotty pricing question, it might. But often you'll find what your stakeholder is looking for is just reassurance. It's just reassure me that people don't hate that flavor, or reassure me that I've picked the right name from the options that I had. And actually, in that case, just a light touch check within a wider questionnaire is enough to deliver that. So what we decided to do was consolidate a wide range of possible questions into essentially one masterwork Uber concept testing template, which has one consistent spine of mandatories. So you can ask those. Any concept test you do in the business has to do these, but you also have modules that you can switch on and off depending on the strategic need at the time, and the flexibility of creating something fully bespoke, which Toluna was great to be able to offer that.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about how that process worked. So we started off by plugging our expert research team and our expert project management team into Rose's expert insight team, who knew what they wanted and had some of the materials that they wanted to create that spine. And we co-created that custom concept testing template with those additional modules that could be added on. And that might be something like and Western dot pricing. It might be something like, do you want to do a pack test in this particular one? So you can add these modules in or out, as well as adding bespoke questions on a case-by-case basis, on a test-by-test basis. And also uploading some key AEI metrics that were really important to come out for Asahi. That then created the ability to have this consistent approach where the team can always have that spine and can then choose the various different modular bits that need to come in for that particular test and add their own bespoke questions on top where that's needed to be done in a particular type of format where needed. That then allows the test to be run. You can pinpoint the AEI audience for each test in over 70 markets to over 40 million consumers. And that's particularly important in some of the hard-to-reach markets like China, or perhaps in the Far East. And then you've got instant access to those results in real time, and the ability to start analyzing them straight away whilst you're waiting perhaps for a more lengthy analytical report to come back from the research team. Now before we go into the next slide, I will just warn anyone, and some of you may know this already if you already used Toluna, that actually analyzing results in real time whilst they're still populating, whilst being a great deal of fun, can be hugely addictive. So just be careful of that if you start doing it. But on the left-hand side here, you can see some data as it comes in. You can start creating subpopulations, stat tests. You can create derived questions, crosstab. I'm not going to read the slide. You can see it all yourself. But all of those things you can start to do either with the data as it's populating or indeed straight after you get the results back through. Similarly, though, there's a lot more that you can do which you can make bespoke. How do you use it, Rosa?
Yeah, I use it in a lot more of a light touch way. So it's great to be able to do that. And I think when you've got resource and capacity in your team, the ability to be able to do some of those more sophisticated things is awesome. Personally, what I love about it is actually being able to go in and just get some really quick, grabbable charts or headlines, like for a crucial meeting that's been dropped in last minute, a week before the debrief, classic. And yeah, I just need to be able to give my stakeholder a heads up. Is this a disaster or is this fantastic news? Which concept has won? And it makes them feel like they're really getting that agile service. If you've just got some word clouds and some bar charts just after, or even sometimes during field work. So yeah, that's been fantastic and really helped us deliver that speed to decision making and help people start getting those clues earlier. So what were our overall learnings from going through this process of streamlining? What might you want to be thinking about if it's something you're looking to be doing yourself within MPD in your business? I think the really big learning for us was stakeholders need continuity. At the end of the day, they don't really care what's going on in the engine room. They don't need to know what's kind of going on. You can back it as a methodology, and they're not really that interested. So fundamentally, what we were asked to deliver was, it sounds a bit boring, but a new methodology that looked exactly like the old methodology. So by being able to have our own KPIs built in and essentially deliver the outputs in exactly the same way that everyone was used to, it felt very seamless. And yeah, happy stakeholders means happy me. The second thing was, for me, there's always a need to balance up research expertise with technology. There's a lot of amazing, super sexy tools out there that we looked at that look fantastic. But I always need it to be partnered with research expertise. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, I want to know that it's not just a cool SaaS platform, but it's also someone who really knows about concept testing or really knows about research or really knows about innovation. So I need that balance there. And actually, the third thing, the other trade-off, in fact, probably the biggest trade-off you'll find yourself making in any kind of process like this, is the need for speed and agility and the need for detail. Now, I hope you won't mind me saying, when we pitched this out, we spoke to a number of really amazing suppliers, and we saw some very cool tools which were super tight, highly standardized, really, really, really quick turnaround. But I think for us in our business, and it will really differ depending on your role as the insight team, in the MPD process, our role is very much to deliver the why behind the what. It's not enough to just say, these were the results. It's failed. It's passed. If I can't stand there and explain why it's failed or why it's passed, it doesn't really matter that I delivered the results in 24 hours. It doesn't help them decide what to do, and it doesn't help them know what to do next. So I really needed that balance of speed, but also detail. And I think that's been the hardest thing to trade off, and the most careful balance that we've had to make throughout. I think we're still on a journey. We haven't, finalized and made it perfect. When you start a whole new methodology with a whole new provider, there will always be things that you might want to tweak. And it's important that you engage with someone who is open to that and has both the capability and the will to have that test and learn mentality. So the masterwork template is still being added to, still a question will come up every new test. You're like, oh, actually, that's a really good question. We should have that. So it's becoming a kind of compendium of all of possible concept testing questions you could ask from this bit of the process. But yeah, just with that flexibility to switch on and off. And, ultimately we want to build a briefing template where that switching on and off perhaps can be, a real form that stakeholders can go through and tick or cross. So we're constantly tweaking it to make it as user-friendly as it can be for the insight team and beyond. And then the last thing, I keep banging on about it, but for us, flexibility was really, really key. There's no point moving from one set of outsourced black box solutions to another one. So we really wanted to have that flexibility and that sort of hybrid engagement model that allows us to be a bit self-service, a bit full service, a bit DIY, to ultimately, I think it reflects more accurately the day-to-day work of supporting an MPD process with insight. So that was really key for us.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And it was really nice, actually. You said something there in that last section about that flexibility and that need to be able to get to the data and explain the why behind it that was so important. Sort of overtook the need for speed, as they say, to use that famous tagline. And we find with our clients, the focus in this session has been concept testing, as you can see. If I very quickly flick to the next slide, you can see that forms one part of our Agile suite of services. And what's really nice in that link that you just made there, Rosa, is that all of this is available to be done on a DIY basis. All of this is available to be done on a full service basis, and everything that sits then in between. And that's what really our customers value in different occasions under different circumstances. Sometimes you really need to dig into the data, and sometimes you need it in 3 hours. And that's the advantage of being able to have that agile service model where you can go from one side to the other. If anybody wants to come and talk to us on the stand, we're right outside the door. You don't have to do it today. You can come tomorrow, although you might want to visit us just after 5 because we'll be having one premium product, Asahi Superdry, which has a lovely, crisp, fresh taste, and also the opportunity to try one of your most recent innovations, if you want to.
Well, I'm reliably informed that someone's managed to access the hot off the press Prolinaster 0%. So wait till it's chilled. It took us ages to find it. It must be so popular it's sold out everywhere. But do come by and have a try of one of the latest innovations coming out of AEI. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks very much. And there's a couple of other things on the stand as well.
We've got time? We've got time for some questions, maybe.
So we do have time for questions, if anybody has any questions.
Just thinking about the beer now. Not so much additional things that weren't already happening, but they were happening in different ways and different methodologies. So we had lots of very deep dive concept testing approaches already happening. It's just, they were happening, one market was doing it one way, one market was doing it another way, and they were taking a long time and they were all different. So what we've done to make sure that the why that we can deliver is just as comprehensive as possible is we've assimilated all of it. So I would say there's not that much new in the questionnaire. It's more just you've got all of the possibilities, so you can make a better guess of what is the why going to be, and you can put in the right questions to dig into the specific topics you care about for that concept. Does that make sense?
Any other questions?
You mentioned that you're adding in a lot of these kind of tests that you've done before. How do you manage how much time the actual survey takes if you're adding a lot of
Yeah.
at some stage you need to cut that out, right?
Yeah, well, it's all modular. So I'm adding it into the master, but you would never ask all of them at the same time. So with every new concept test, I'll go through a briefing process with that stakeholder, and I'll ask them, some strategic questions about where they are in the, do you have any marketing for this product? No. Okay, we'll switch off that module. Do you have flavor alternatives? No. Okay, we'll switch off that module. Do you have some claims to test? Oh, okay, we'll turn that on. So yeah, it needs to be managed with them, but the length is such that, you would never have all of them, definitely. We'll have to ask the Toluna team outside. I've no idea.
It's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't think we got the researcher in. We'll come back to you.
Put it like this, short enough that people have been completing them so far.
Yeah. Great opportunity to come back to you later.
Thank you. Oh, I think, yeah, okay.
Brilliant. Any other questions at all?
I'll shout, you can repeat it. Rosie, what would you do differently? Because you've gone on a brilliant journey. Thank you. You've gone on a brilliant journey, and thank you both, that's excellent. You've gone on a brilliant journey, and you've done things differently, and you've changed the way Asahi does this. There's always things you've done differently when you do it again. So when you do, I think, brand health or something else, what would you do differently?
Well, I think the point about that we're still honing it, I think what I would have done differently is I would have managed expectations slightly differently early on. I think it's always the way when you engage a new provider and start a new process, it's going to take longer. So probably early on, you maybe shouldn't say, great, we've got this fantastic new tool and it's going to make everything faster. It will make everything faster, but not immediately. So you just need to maybe get through those first few tests and sort out what's your new process going to be together before you can deliver the full vision. So I would say just managing those expectations would probably be that's what I'd do next time.
Great answer. It's a journey.
It's a journey. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think
we're there.
Thank you
Excellent.
very much, guys.
Thanks very much, everybody.